Hi guys. Today we are going to be talking about Noah and the flood. I just recorded a very long video for you guys and I stuttered the entire way through, so I decided to reshoot it because it was just really bad. Now, last video was talking about Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and I need to bring up a few of those things again so that this portion of Noah and the flood makes sense. So again, from the Adam and Eve story, do we believe that this is a fact-based story? Probably not. Moses is the author of the first 5 books of the Old Testament. One of the things I want you guys to note is that at the time that these books were written, they were not Christian books. There is no Christ yet, okay? Christ, Christian goes together. Once we get the New Testament, that's when we can begin to see Christ in the Old Testament. But at the time this was written, they're Jewish books, okay? They're not Christian books yet, they're Jewish books. So Moses was writing down stories that he had heard. We're not necessarily concerned with science. Like, was the earth created? Yeah. Did it happen in the way that it says in scripture? No, it didn't happen that way. But those stories are meant to tell us about the development of our spirituality, our relationship with Christ, the development of the church, all of those things. With Adam and Eve, when we talked about the Garden of Eden was actually placed like on top of a mountain. And this is an important point because when people talked about relationships with gods, they often felt that a person had to go up a mountain because that was your closest way to getting to the sky where the gods resided. If you are interested in like Greek mythology, the gods were seen to reside on Mount Olympus because that was the place that was touching the clouds. It was up high. So when you went to meet with a god, you went to a mountaintop. Eden is a mountain. So essentially we have a temple on top of a mountain that God was there. God was within that garden, but man got kicked out of it because he ate the fruit. He ate the fruit. His nakedness was exposed, which, that talks about shame. That's something else there. And man was removed from the temple. We talked last week about how an angel was put to guard the east. The whole reason that an angel guarded the east is because temple doors for Jewish religions faced east. So that is telling us the door to the temple was blocked off. Now, this is what happens with Noah. I'm going to briefly tell you the story and tell you how the story originated. Noah was noted as the only man that seemed to give a crap. It doesn't say crap in the Bible, but this is my loose translation, about being righteous and having a relationship with God. So God looked at creation and he was like, this is awful. I'm going to destroy all of it. Except for Noah, I like that guy. Okay. So what we're actually having here is in the book of Genesis, we start with Adam and Eve, and he creates this world. He brings forth this creation. And then when Adam and Eve are created, he tells them, be fruitful and multiply. This is actually the exact same thing. The words that are used in the Noah flood story are the same as with Adam and Eve. He tells them to do the same thing when they land in their boat, safe and sound, be fruitful and multiply. Now, one of the things that we need to make note of, would it make sense for 2 individuals, starting with Adam and Eve, to populate the earth? It would not, because there would be so much incest that people would be so unhealthy that they would die. We see this in, if you study different kingdoms, they used to believe that the bloodline had to remain royal, so they would make brothers and sisters marry each other. Fathers would impregnate their daughters. It was all this mixing of very close relatives, and people ended up dying horribly young, like in their teen years, early 20s. They were disfigured because of incest. Now, when we look at these stories, we did not come from just 2 people in that way. When you read further into after Adam and Eve are banished from the garden, they go into a village with other people. Okay, so this is not meant to be a scientific understanding of how we came, like how our lineage came to be. Okay, so hold on to that. Now, this is what happens with Noah. Noah is told to build an ark. He builds an ark. He takes 2 of every type of animal. Later in the story, it tells us he took 7 of every animal. We don't know what he really did. And put them on the boat. The world was flooded. God restarted creation. And then we get to this point where we're told that God forgot about Noah in the boat, which cracks me up. It basically was like, oh, and then God remembered about Noah in the ark. So that's just funny. Did God really forget about him? Probably not. But there's this point in the Noah story when Noah's growing anxious They have been floating for 40 days, which is a very popular number in scripture. And he's like, okay, we're just going to be stuck on this boat, us and all these animals. And so he starts to send out birds to see if the waters are receding. And I want to read this part to you because this is going to help you understand where the story came from. At the end of the 40 days, Noah opened the window of the ark, which he had made, and sent forth a raven, and it went to and fro until the waters were dried up from the earth. Then he sent forth a dove to see if the waters had subsided from the face of the ground. But the dove found no place to set her foot, so she returned to him, to the ark, for the waters were still on the face of the whole earth. So he put forth his hand, and took her, and brought her into the ark. He waited another 7 days, and again he sent forth the dove out of the ark. And the dove came back to him in the evening, and behold, in her mouth a freshly plucked olive leaf. So Noah knew that the waters had subsided on the earth. Then he waited another 7 days, sent forth a dove, and she did not return to him. After the waters subside and everybody exits the boat, Noah makes a sacrifice to God. This is something that we have to understand in Jewish culture, is that sacrificial relationships with God are extremely important. So what the Jewish people believed is that whenever you sealed a relationship with God, or sealed a relationship or a covenant with somebody else, something had to basically be sacrificed. And this was also common with sin. If you sinned, if you screwed up, you had to place your sin on an animal and kill the animal, because that animal would bear the weight of your sin. And we will see this with Jesus, because that's essentially what happened. Jesus came to a Jewish community. That's very important for us to understand, because otherwise the stuff that Jesus did would not make sense. So that was from Noah, from the book written by Moses about Noah. That's where that story came from. Now, at the same time, or a little before this story was written, we have the Epic of Gilgamesh. And I'm going to read this portion to you. When a 7th day arrived, I sent forth a dove and released it. The dove went off, but came back to me. No perch was visible, so it circled back to me. I sent forth a swallow and released it. The swallow went off, but he came back to me. No perch was visible, so it circled back to me. I sent forth a raven and released it. The raven went off and saw the water slither back. It eats, it scratches, it bobs, but it does not circle back to me. Then I sent out everything in all directions, and I sacrificed a sheep. This is from the Ballad of Gilgamesh. Now, one of the things that we know to be true is that Moses adopted the Ballad of Gilgamesh to write the Noah and the flood story. Okay, so we are looking at a flood story that is very popular. And people who lived in the Mediterranean, where this story originated from, flood narratives were very popular because the Mediterranean flooded a lot. And people were trying to understand what the heck was happening with their environment. And they were like, okay, well, the god or the gods have to be flooding the earth, okay? This is their understanding. Does it mean that a big flood happened and Noah built a boat, or Gilgamesh built a boat? No, it doesn't mean that that happened. But there were floods, okay? Did it flood the whole earth? Probably not. One of the big things that Catholics are meant to pull from Noah and the flood is how it shows a rebirth of creation. So basically, he started with Adam and Eve, and he starts over again. And after Noah exits the boat, he tells them, be fruitful and multiply. This is the same thing that he tells Adam and Eve, be fruitful and multiply. So they go off and repopulate the earth. In Adam and Eve's story, they eat the fruit, they realize that they are naked, they feel exposed, and God actually kills an animal so that they can have their bodies covered. With Noah, when he gets off the boat, he plants a vineyard, gets trashed, and gets naked and exposes his nakedness. So this is the same thing. So we have exposed nakedness, consuming of fruit, breaking their covenants with God. And what actually happens with Noah is his son sees him naked, and he goes and tells his brothers, he's like, father's drunk and hanging out. And so the other brothers put a cloak on their shoulders, and they walk backwards so they don't see their father, and drop the cloak over their father so that he's no longer exposed. And what their dad does then, the son that saw him, he curses his son and says, Canaan, who is the son of Ham, make the Canaanites a slave. Okay, so is this God saying, I want the Canaanites to be slaves because their father saw Noah naked? No. What happened, and this happens in Scripture, remember, Scripture is written by men. This was written by Moses. And Moses was looking at what was occurring around him, and the Canaanites were slaves. And so he was trying to make a justification for how the Canaanites came to be slaves. And so he was like, well, Noah must have cursed them. Okay, so there's that. Now, again, when the ark had landed, this is probably going to be one of our final points for this video. It landed on a mountaintop. So just like we had a mountaintop for Eden, we have a mountaintop for the ark, because mountaintops are the meeting place with the gods. As Moses is, bringing this narrative forward, he is still exposed to the mythologies that are around him. And that's just very commonplace. Like with the Epic of Gilgamesh, there's multiple gods and they're very human-like and they live at the top of a mountain. When we're looking at the development of one god, there are still these carryovers from mythologies that were around them. So again, we have the top of a mountain where God would meet people. The ark is meant to symbolize a new temple for us. So we have the Garden of Eden, which was a temple that Adam was like not allowed to be the priest. He was thrown out. The same thing happens with the temple that is now on top of the mountain, the ark. Noah sinned by getting drunk and exposing himself. So he, again, is not fit to be in the temple. So what we're going to end up talking about next week, we're going to hop over to Abraham. Abraham is the one where historical significance begins to matter. Is Adam a real person? Probably not. Were there first people? Yeah. Noah, did he really exist? Probably not. But it's important storytelling to get us to actually where there is some historical relevance to scripture. Now, what I want you guys to write about in your writing prompt is explain to me, and if you didn't remember, just go back and watch the video. It's not very long. The importance of mountains. What is the importance of mountains when it comes to other mythologies, and what's the importance of mountains when it comes to the writings of Moses? Now, the other thing that I want you to write about is how you understood Noah and the flood before this video. So tell me what you thought about Noah and the flood story before you and I talked. If you had never heard the story before, that's fine. But now that you're understanding that Moses adopted this from another community, was there a worldwide flood? Probably not. Was there isolated floods in the Mediterranean? Absolutely yes. So explain that to me. Something just fell down in the hallway. Anyway, I think this video is long enough. So also at the end of the month, you will not be getting a video around Halloween. I don't have the date, but I'll attach it in the email. We will not be doing a video because we're going to actually have an All Hallows Eve party, which you are all invited to. So you can take that as a break. But anyway, I hope you all have an absolutely wonderful week, and I will send out a video next week. Bye.